taxes are only a percentage of what you make. So we actually focus on that, in my eyes, too often. We spend a lot of time focusing on taxes instead of looking at how much did we profit, right? And trying to find ways to increase that.
Hello, and welcome to Holistic Ambition, where we talk with visionary leaders about creating a career, relationships, and a life that is sustainable to your well-being, meaningful, and a lot of fun in the process. I'm your host, Stephanie Thoma, founder of Holistic Ambition Life Coaching and author of Confident Introvert. Today, we have Staci Millard with us. She is a strategic business advisor and profit strategist with 10 years of entrepreneurship as a chartered accountant. Staci works with entrepreneurs on the brink of burnout to figure out the mess and realign the pieces so they can take back control and make work fun again. Staci is a mom of two and a multi-passionate entrepreneur. She leans into her dedication to changing the world through her two businesses, School for Small Business and Love Powered Co. Her journey through entrepreneurship taught her more about life and happiness than she ever could have imagined when she started out, and she is passionate about sharing what she has learned with others. All right, Staci, I'm so curious about, your experience as an accountant, how people can begin to maximize their wealth, no matter what the situation that they are currently in is.
Yeah. So the very first step, Stephanie, is just becoming aware. I find through all of my years, whether it was with individuals or businesses, that we actually just have this aversion to looking at our money and being aware of it. It holds a lot of shame and a lot of guilt if we're not as far as what we are or want to be. Sorry. It's a measurement almost of like how good of a human we are. And so we avoid looking at it, and we cannot maximize what we're not even aware of. So your very first step in any situation is becoming aware of how much you hold, and then becoming aware of the patterns. So even from a very basic personal level, if you look at the debt levels on a national average, they're just getting higher and higher. And a lot of us are actually using spending as a way to kind of soothe our nervous systems. It's, bad habits that have existed for many years, and we need to become aware of those. So those would be my first couple steps.
Yeah, so not necessarily spending in the hopes that your income will catch up. I know that is a strategy for some in the entrepreneur space, living the lifestyle that people can aspire to, but maybe not actually having finances that are there yet. So I think that's a great tip. And when it comes to having that level of dedication to looking at the books and are there certain areas of spending that you would recommend that people look at more? And also, I'm curious about your thoughts on, investing in yourself and your growth versus saving, or how the two can work together.
Yeah, for sure. So there's really some key areas of business. Like when we look at financial statements as an accountant, we break them down to sales, cost of sales. So like those things that either if you're a service-based company, your people, or your actual expenses. So we kind of break those down, and those are areas that we have to look at. But there's not one individual item. Every single business is different. How we generate money and how we generate profit is so unique. But what I see is that people get stuck on the top line. Like, how do I bring money in? So usually looking deeper than like, am I making sales? Especially if you're beyond year 1 or year 2 of business. One of the things I see in the online world is a huge amount of reinvestment. I look at this area and I'm like, this is, from a business model perspective, these businesses have the ability to make the most amount of money. The overhead is so low. There's no expenses really. And I'm watching a lot of coaches walk away with nearly nothing left at the end of the day because they reinvest so much in personal development. And I would say I take a little bit different approach to this. And I would do the same thing if you had a product-based business or a service-based business, where you would never reinvest everything you make into research and development. right? You'd put a part of it there, but not all of it. And that's how I look at the online space as well, is I would never invest all of what I'm making into the next level of coaching. Because I think if you go back to the beginning of time, the basics of business are pretty similar, right? Find something that people want, do great customer service. Like there's some things that have never changed. And I don't think that there's anything shocking out there in terms of like business models that are really worth investing every penny you've made. So I look at it a little different.
Yeah. And, that kind of reminds me of, there's a woman in the coaching industry, Amanda Francis, and she's been very public about even paying her coaches less than what she charges, so
Yeah.
that can be a big shift for people to consider, that that's possible if you are, in the coaching space, for example. And, I'd like to talk about this concept of good debt. So, when it comes to finances, and certainly investing in your growth, investing in the growth of your business, how can you tell the difference and discern between what is good debt that's actually helping you versus what's beyond your means and not helpful?
Yeah. So first of all, I love Amanda Francis. She has a course out right now, and I was looking at the investment. Like I love looking from the outside in, and I'm like, okay, so a $2,000 investment for a course that you could consume the content and change your mindset over a matter of like 6, 8, 10 months. Like that feels like a pretty good return to me. What I'm spending in terms of what I'm getting back, right? And that's actually how I look at my investments in any way, and also consider taking on debt. Like, what am I getting back for what I'm kind of putting out into the world? So in terms of debt, the biggest thing is your ability to pay it back, right? And I know a lot of coaches are like, well, if you don't take the leap, and there is a difference, and it's hard to quantify, but there's a difference between, taking a calculated risk and then just being a little bit crazy and reckless. And really the difference for me is, have you sat back to look at how are you going to earn that money back? And I don't mean if somebody's promised you you're going to earn it back, because they actually can't guarantee that unless they're going to give you your money back. But what is the likelihood of you getting a return on your money? So are you one client away? Are you 2 clients away? Are you 50 clients away? Like, how does that look for you? Are you even likely to hit that number? And then you can decide like, okay, this is worth taking on. Also, like, in terms of debt, are we talking about $1,000 on a credit card or $20,000 on a credit card? If you had to go back to a corporate job, how quickly would it be like something that you can pay down? And really kind of making those decisions from that way, not from the marketing that you're seeing.
Yeah, yeah. And, this is something that before, the recording, we were talking a bit about just having this level of discernment when making investments in your business. And, I love what you just brought up about not leaving it to chance or a pure gut feeling. So, I'd like to kind of dive into the topic of intuition and using your intuition to make business choices versus balancing that with your logical brain and potential self-doubt.
Yeah. So I find personally that my intuition actually leads from a place of, if I dig deeper on it, my gut feelings go with my desires, if that makes any sense. So am I coming from a place of like, I'm hoping somebody will save me? Am I coming from a place of just like, I just need to get there, just tell me what to do? Or am I coming from a place of intrigue, right? So sort of that fear space, or something that's like super empowered and I'm excited to learn something new. Because most of my gut instinct, that's like, I play into the marketing and I skip maybe the intuition piece. I'm just like, okay, fine, let's do it. And then it doesn't work out, is always coming from that place of scarcity, lack, outsourcing my power. Whereas when I'm really grounded in myself and having success in those decisions, it's always from a place of like, okay, like I'm doing all right. This is kind of cool to learn next.
Yeah. And, this kind of brings us to the topic of self-awareness and being able to discern if your nervous system is regulated, if it's not, if you're making decisions from this place of fear and like, oh my gosh, let's say I need to make this investment because of XYZ versus this totally different picture that you painted around, oh, I'm curious about that. That actually feels really aligned and the numbers are adding up. I think I'm going to move forward. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So nervous system regulation is something that I learned, later on in my business career. And I think it would have, had I learned it earlier on, would have significantly impacted me in a great way. Understanding what my body was telling me, what state I was in, and just based on that state, what kind of decisions I would make. That's so incredibly important. If you haven't dug into any somatic work that and inner child healing, that would be one of the very first things that I would do as a business owner, really.
And that's such a holistic approach in itself to, I mean, in my experience of going to personal development and leadership conferences, that's always what it comes down to. People who haven't done the work, the money is great, right? We live in a capitalistic society. It's great to be financially secure and abundant. However, if you haven't touched on the inner child stuff and, the self-worth and all of that, then it's something that you're still going to have to work on even after all of the success. So you might as well kind of have it, have a nice baseline going. And so I'm curious, we've gone into more of the holistic side of things, prioritizing inner child work. And I'm curious when it comes to your own business trajectory and sort of where you started, maybe some hiccups that stand out to you that you then overcame to get to a place where you are managing not just one, but two businesses. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your successes and maybe kind of rewind the clock for us?
Yeah, for sure. So early on, one of the things that really stood out to me was that I was looking for ease and that I wanted to be making money. I wanted to feel safe with the amount of money I was making. And I wanted to also have a life and I wanted to have an impact on the world. Right. So those are kind of like the three things for me that always stand out. And early on, I thought I had to do it all. And what I very first started with in terms of development was figuring out a way to do more, right? We all go to that like efficiency, like how do I optimize my schedule? So early on, I tried that out, tried it on for size. It actually didn't lead to me being any happier. So then I started looking at like, okay, well, high performing, like how do I get happier in my life? And it's led me on a journey that had some systems for sure, but it also had a lot of just healing, understanding myself, understanding my patterns. At one point, I learned that if, I'm the problem, but that also means that I'm the solution, especially when leading a team. And that took me a while just to even like come to terms with. And then I would describe sort of the last stage. It's almost like you grow up with your business. And the last stage is really this like almost death of the ego where you no longer matter. You still have to lead the ship, but you lose your attachment to the business in a way that it's like fulfilling you as a person. That's how I got to a place where I'm like running multiple businesses. I don't have to have my hands on everything. I feel just like secure as a person. Through that way, I've, tried everything on for size because I'm a big fan of the idea that nothing works the same for everybody. So, hypnotherapy, Reiki, somatic therapy, traditional therapy in a conjunction with all sorts of different business coaching, strategy, learning different tactics. But really at the heart of it all was understanding who I was and what worked for me. And sometimes I gave into the marketing that promised me results. And the biggest thing was I was proud of myself for being able to say, no, this doesn't work for me. I invested in all those things in a way that I could kind of back out of and I could try something different. That gave me the flexibility to see what worked and what didn't.
Totally. Being able to have the freedom and flexibility to pivot if needed and to be discerning about, oh, like, where is this decision making coming from? And, I love that there's this emphasis on really creating your life as you create your businesses in tandem. And, so you have School for Small Business and you have Love Powered Co. Can you tell us about maybe which one came first and what inspired each?
Yeah. So School for Small Business really came from my work in the accounting days, my love for small businesses. I got to see how they were like the backbones of our communities, how they adapted, how they gave back. And it was just really incredible. I fell out of love with accounting and more in love with the strategy and helping businesses succeed. So that definitely came first. But I have two daughters, they're 5 and 7, and Love Powered Co came at a time where I was doing a lot of learning about myself. We'd had a fair bit of tragedy, different circumstances in our family. And then my oldest was about 4 years old. So she was quite young, and she was diagnosed with ADHD. And around the same time, that learning for me, I got to see that the suicide rates for children or women specifically with ADHD are actually substantially higher than if you weren't neurodivergent. And she was sitting in she was just mad at life and how she couldn't relate to people the same. And she was sitting in a closet, and she said she didn't want to be a part of this world. So I amplified my journey on becoming emotionally resilient and like really leaning into teaching kids how to relate to the world and to be able to know ourselves, understand our nervous systems. And then eventually along the way, Love Powered Co came for sale. We use the affirmation cards. The difference in my daughter was absolutely incredible, coming from that little girl in the closet who just like was ready to give up to this girl who just stands with so much conviction. Just sometimes tough as a parent, but every day she just believes in herself. She believes in her strengths. She knows herself probably better than I do as an adult, and she can understand the state that she's in. And that just became so important to me to amplify that message. So when I when I saw that it was an opportunity that I could help with that, I jumped on it.
And, it really does come full circle as you create a business, as you create literal children. And, it sounds like there's such an inspiration that you've been attuning to. And instead of seeing just, oh my goodness, there's this issue that my child is experiencing, really being a part of the solution, not just for your child, but on a broader scale, it is really beautiful. And, I'm curious, like, what is something that really motivates and drives you these days? Let's say, in addition to your relationship, with your family, in addition to the impact that you're making with your business, is there anything else that's kind of really present for you in your life that maybe you wouldn't have expected would be a priority or a consideration before you became a business owner?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, like when I became a business owner, survival mode was pretty much my baseline, right? And I was definitely not aware of it. I can only spot that now that I don't live in that state anymore. But it was a lot of work and a lot of hours. And that's where I felt comfortable. And that's where my body felt comfortable and safe. And it kind of guided my actions. Now in business, my baseline is being able to do work that I absolutely love, that I'm lit up, that I feel creative. That's sort of my guide. Do I feel creative? Am I excited by doing the work every day? And I do get to do that, but I also just live by this new standard of really having so much time and space to kind of be able to flow through different states, to rest when we need to rest, to enjoy the moments with my daughters and just be like fully present. Whereas old business Staci was just getting by. I'm just getting through it. I'm just trying to get to the next stage. This one's more about being fully in every single moment.
And that level of presence, how do you find that impacts both your bottom line, your client's bottom line, in terms of having consistent sales? Like, what is that relationship like if there is one?
Yeah, I work so often with business owners on this because when they're in that survival mode, it's always this roller coaster. You never know what's next. You're literally your body in that fight flight state is your perception is actually just so much narrower, right? So you actually can't see what you need to be doing. And it's just this harmful cycle. So when you start getting to that state of that grounded and present and giving yourself more space, your sales become more consistent, and that leads to more space for you to feel that ease, right? You can see more opportunities as they present themselves. You are just in general making way better decisions for your mind, your body, your family, your customers, your team, really anybody impacted. So Personally, I've obviously had a benefit from it. I've grown and sold a 7-figure business. That's when I hit 7 figures, was around the time when I figured that out, no more survival mode. And I coach every single one of my clients on how to get there.
Yeah. So can we talk about when it comes time to sell a business, when to discern between when it's actually time for that, how to prepare? Let's say, I know that many entrepreneurs, their companies like their baby, like they can't sell my baby. So, I'm curious about, yeah, about that sort of transition and intentional decision making.
Yeah. So the best time to plan for selling a business is long before you ever plan on selling a business. First of all, your business will benefit from it if you're in a place where you've taken those steps. Cause I'll tell you, like, a sellable business is just a well-run business. And so that's the first thing I would say is always start at the very start. The second piece is there's like some key aspects of what makes a great business to purchase. So that's what you need to think of when you're selling. You want something that's profitable, something that's repeatable. So a business that's going to generate the same results for somebody else as it would have for you. And when you start making decisions from those areas, you have to look at the numbers. And that's where I mentioned the ego death. You have to basically not call your business your baby anymore, right?
Mhm.
And the funny part is when you get to that place, for most entrepreneurs who are in that like survival mode state, they actually are finally freed from it. They realize like, oh my gosh, my employees can make decisions and this can be fun and all these different things. It's like, that's where they finally hit the flow that they were looking for on day one. But it took almost like this letting go and less gripping. And so I think that's really incredible. But setting your business up for a sale, the other thing I would just add for anybody who's like, I don't need that, is there may come a time where you get sick. There may come a time where you decide you don't want to be involved anymore. And most business sales are looked at in a like previous fashion, like at least a couple years. So you don't want to get a couple years down the road and then just be like, oh, like now I want to sell and things have looked awful for the past couple of years. People don't buy opportunity really, because they have to deliver on that, right? They have to put in the effort. So you can't sell like, hey, you have a great opportunity to make some money here. It's like, no, I want something proven. Do you have sales? How do you have a profitable business? So that's why you want to start today, because you're going to want to have that history when you go to sell down the road.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm hearing this level of intentionality, and it's not just a fluke decision where you wake up one day, no, I want to sell my business. It's something that you prepare for, you set up systems, and most importantly, there's a separation between yourself and the business where it can run without you.
Yeah. So my decision to sell my business was actually like very sudden. I had been feeling the nag of like, this isn't right for me. And then literally I was on vacation in Mexico. I was like, okay, if I wanted this business to be what I, feel good at, what would it be like? I've realized we're drastically different than what I was expecting. And I thought, like, I'm not going to tear this down. This is a valuable business to somebody. So I'm going to list it for sale. And I did, and had multiple offers in a week. So that's very sudden. However, I'd already been taking all the steps: profitable business, solid team in place. I had made sure that the business didn't rely on me. I was in a place where I could take vacation. I could be away from the business without it relying on me. So that enabled me to literally make that decision on a dime. But all of those decisions are what people usually forget,
Mm.
right? They're draining the business of all the money. They maybe aren't investing in team members. They're picking up all the little things that are going wrong themselves instead of creating that dynamic within the team. Like there's all sorts of things that they do to kind of be in their own way that creates headaches for them if they do all of a sudden have to sell.
Yeah. And, when it comes to being in a position to sell your business for 7 figures, I'm sure there are people listening that are thinking that's a goal, that maybe they have, or maybe they're now stretching to be like, you know what, I want to have that goal. So, what are some of the factors from, beyond the structural components that you've discussed? what are some other aspects that you believe separate, let's say, a 7-figure exit from, a 6-figure exit, for example?
Yeah, really, it's like your ability to help. So a 7-figure exit really just has to do with the profitability of your business. It just means it's a bigger business. So to me, a bigger business is helping more people. You're looking at how is it replicable, and really about the size and the scale of the business is what I would say. So if you're, making a couple $100,000 a year, you're never going to be able to exit at 7 figures. You need to scale a business that size. And really how you're going to get there would be so different for everybody. That's one of my biggest pet peeves about the online space is like we spit out so much advice, but advice should actually be tailored to what level your business is at, and how developed it is, because what you need could be very different from the same person kind of standing next to you or another person standing next to you. For example, somebody early on, if we are going to them saying like, you need structure and you need backup, employees in place and all this stuff, like that's not actually what you need at all. You just need to keep selling. Like you need a better baseline before you start putting that structure in place. So, that's really what I would say is like being able to scale a business that's big enough. There's ways of valuing your business. So, use those methods along the way to see like, okay, what could I sell this for? And if you're not where you want to be, then you go a little bit further. What I want to say is like, you can have a business that brings in $10 million a year and maybe makes, $20,000 at the end. They've got profit of that. You can also have a business that brings in $400,000 a year and there's $300,000 of profit. So there's no like hit this revenue mark and you're doing great. There is a like always looking at the bottom line. That's what's going to tell you how much you'll garner in a sale.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly kind of going even back to the beginning of our conversation around looking at the numbers, having an awareness of what they are, different trends, different patterns. So, what's another mistake that, let's say that someone is consistently looking at the money coming in, the money going out? What's a common accounting sort of mistake that you see small business owners making that they can begin to intentionally become more aware of so they don't fall into, whatever trap comes from that mistake?
Yeah, I have a few. One of them is not numbers related at all. It's actually not knowing your customer enough, your entire business model. So how much maybe that you're charging or what you're putting into the sale and what you're spending on each doesn't match what your customer wants. So you're not really maximizing that. So I think that's really important. From an accounting perspective, I mean, we probably have listeners from all over the place here, so I'm not going to go into the taxes, but the one thing I would say is that taxes are only a percentage of what you make. So we actually focus on that, in my eyes, too often. We spend a lot of time focusing on taxes instead of looking at how much did we profit, right? And trying to find ways to increase that. And there's only three major components to making money. It's how much you're bringing in, how much you're spending per sale, and then the overall overhead of a business. So have you overcommitted in terms of rent? Have you overcommitted in terms of employees? Are you efficient? A really great example is I worked with a candle company, and if you're physically making each candle, like how expensive is that in terms of labor, right? So just looking at the numbers and saying, okay, how can I maximize this?
And how can a small business discern, a common trajectory that I have personally witnessed is maybe being a sole proprietor, moving on to an LLC, going into an S corp. What are your thoughts on how a small business can maximize the retention of what they're earning?
Yeah, so I have zero thoughts on that. I'm Canadian. Our
Mm.
rate, our kind of levels are so different.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
again, like, so that would be more tax strategy. But again, like I
Right.
really focus on you making money, and then you can optimize for taxes, but focus on making money first.
Yeah. Okay. So, so many nuggets of wisdom here. I'm wondering when it comes to, in a broad sense, how you define ambition. How do you define it? What comes up for you when you hear that word?
Yeah, ambition to me is a pull from the inside to do something extraordinary.
Mm, yeah. And, when it comes to holistic ambition, what does that mean to you? Is there any sort of difference, or maybe there's a more concise way, more elaborate?
Yeah, so holistic ambition, more specifically to me, means a centered, present, grounded approach to ambition. Because I think often we can just get very frantic and almost this chaotic energy around trying to succeed and we're ambitious. But holistic ambition is coming back to really nurturing our all parts of ourselves, our mind, our body, our soul, our families, and being able to be present and enjoy the process. So you still
Mm,
have the ambition, but in a much more grounded way.
I love that. The sense of groundedness and enjoyment and fun, that was in your bio, and I definitely resonated with that. So, for anyone who is interested in learning more about you and connecting, how can they do that?
Yeah. So the best way is find me on Instagram. I'm at Staci, Staci.Millard, or School for Small Business on Instagram. We have a podcast. And my favorite is our one-page business plan. I don't like to make things complicated. I want people to find a really simple way of looking at their business that can give them the clarity that they need to succeed. So the link is in the bio for that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Staci Millard. And I would like to thank you at home for watching and tuning in. Consider this your invitation to go ahead and subscribe to be the very first to know of the next Holistic Ambition speaker in our series. Wishing you a beautifully connected day. Until next time.